Welcome to our session today. Glad to see you. Welcome to our continuing conversation, another journey into urgency-based selling. Today's session is brains and guts. Your sales battle plan is only the starting point. It's only the starting point. So this is your battle plan, or this is one version of your battle plan. Now, we're not going to focus primarily on the battle plan. We're going to focus on what you need to do to implement it. If you'd like to get a copy of the battle plan, just write to me after the webinar. I'll be glad to send it to you. Now, your battle plan lays things out, and you see there's two kind of metaphoric icons in the center. The chess piece talks about the brains part, looking into the future. And the poker chip talks about the risk part, the guts part. So it takes brains and guts to match your battle plan. And the central part of today's presentation is going to be a case history. It's an actual case history. I think it took place in the last week, and it shows a dramatic reversal from a situation that was hopeless. And it's by applying brains and guts. Now, before we go to the case history, I'd like to give some background context. Why do some salespeople avoid the bolder behavior, the guts? I offer you as a way to be thoughtful about this, the distinction between social values and business values, or social selling and business selling. A social seller wants to be liked. That's a primary motivation. And I use as my metaphor Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. A business seller wants to earn the right to profitable business. I use as my metaphor this Harvard Business Review article, In a Downturn, Provoke Your Customer. Now you might say, well, which one is it, Andy? Is it social selling or business selling? Collins and Porras in Built to Last calls that kind of a distinction a tyranny of the or. It's a false alternative because you need threshold levels of each. You want a personal relationship and you want a business relationship. It's an and. But the challenge for so many salespeople is they're so focused on social selling that they do develop a social relationship, but none or very little of a business relationship. And the outcome is we don't close the sale. And here's a thought question. Are we helping a prospect who's in a suboptimal position if we don't challenge them? Why do we fail in selling? We don't overcome the three fatal flaws. Let's take a moment or two to look at the three fatal flaws in selling. And in the case that we're going to look at, we're going to deal with the first two. These are all assumptions. The first fatal flaw is assuming the prospect enters the conversation with serious intent. In urgency-based selling, we distinguish between safe and serious conversations. In a safe conversation, you're never going to get a stick of business. The prospect's in that conversation for a different reason than you are, typically a price check. In a serious conversation, that prospect has urgent needs. They're willing to discuss those urgent needs with you. Of course, that's where we want to be. Now, serious conversation doesn't mean that you closed. A serious conversation means you opened. How do you tell the difference between safe and serious? PIKs, payments in kind. It's the behavior the buyer does to show that they're committed to the process. Could be filling out a credit application. Could be introducing you to their boss, putting political capital in the game. So this is really usually one of the biggest reasons why sales processes fail, is the inability to distinguish between safe and serious, or perhaps to earn the right to serious. The second fatal flaw is assuming the prospect believes what we say. The prospect does not believe what we say. When we're doing new business development, the prospect is skeptical. What are you doing to address the skeptical prospect? Now, in the case history we're going to look at, we're going to address the first two fatal flaws to solve the problem. The third fatal flaw is assuming a prospect knows how to make a good decision. Typically they don't, and this is particularly so for the infrequent decision, like how often do you change a CPA firm, as an example. So we need to teach the prospect how to make a good decision, and on a more general basis, your standard sales call, which we'll look at in a moment, and your battle plan should address the three fatal flaws. That's the brains part, because we face the reversal curve. So what's the reversal curve? We make first contact, second contact, third contact, and then we finally close, and it looks linear. And that's one way of viewing the selling process, where urgency keeps on increasing. Let me show you another way, which I think is a better explanation. We make first contact with a prospect, represented by that blue rectangular prism. We have a great meeting. The prospect swears eternal fealty to us, and then we can't get him back on the phone. We go into the trough of the reversal curve. Why does that happen? At least two reasons. The prospect has an incumbent supplier, probably, and at the same time, when they love talking to us, but when they get back to the desk, they got a million things to do. When this is the model, the real story in selling is how do you overcome the reversal curve and rise back to that second meeting, where it may look to you like it's linear, but in effect, we probably have to go through reversal after reversal, a series of yin and yang, soft and hard moves to manage your battle plan. And we're going to look at one case in a moment. Now, at this time of the year, managing this process is really important, because you know the saying, strike when the iron is hot. Some of us, we're in a seasonal business, and it's now when we have to get our sales. But for most of us, we want to hit our numbers for this year. So how are we managing our battle plans? Let's look at the case history that I've been mentioning to you, and how we overcame the first two of the fatal flaws. So we're selling diagnostic tests to an urgent care center. Sue's the buyer. So Sue writes an email to Bob, can you please send me more information? That's fair. She asks for more information. Now Bob comes back, Bob's the salesperson. Bob comes back and says, here's the information you wanted. I have a couple of questions for you. I just tried to call. I wasn't successful in connecting. Could you give me a call? But she doesn't call, and the days go by, right? So Bob gives up the ghost. This thing is out of control. Well, actually, a few days later, he sends another email saying, could we set some time aside to talk? That's reasonable, right? Thought question. Is this a place to offer wisdom? Before we call a prospect, it's generally a good idea to ask this question. What wisdom can we offer? Insights, inside information. Do we have a list of 10, 20 things? So if we want to follow up 10, 20 weeks in a row to a proposal, each time we call, we could give them wisdom. Let's look at wisdom in the context of your standard sales call, part of the brains of the operation. In steps 1 to 7, you set up the serious conversation. How do we know it's serious? Look at the PIKs. In 8 to 12, we do our fact finding, including the important why and why now question. More on that a little bit later. And then, if we decide it's a fit and we want to demonstrate it, in 13 to 18, we manage the opportunity. Now, 1 to 7 is so critical because we're setting up the serious conversation and the serious fact finding. And step 5 is also important, the freebie. It's where we bring the prospect wisdom. So before every call, we should be asking ourselves, what wisdom are we bringing the prospect? Now, this has particular importance in business development when we're trying to displace, to some or greater extent, a competitor who might be seen as the trusted advisor. When we do this, it often looks like we're kicking the ball upfield, a tilted soccer field, where it's the opposition, our competitor, just needs to roll the ball downhill. So we want to be a trusted advisor, just like our competition, which means we have to level the playing field. And one of the central ways to do that is by bringing wisdom, so that you become known as the person who's a consultant, your wisdom. This is a great team operation or a team brainstormer to get wisdom together. Now, finally, Allie gets back to us the next day. It was nice of her to give us feedback. Here's what she said. Hey, thanks for your follow-up. Unfortunately, your pricing is out of our league. We're working with other vendors at better rates, and we're moving forward with the business with them. That was nice of her to give us feedback. What would you do if you were facing this scenario? A recommendation, if you're not already doing it, is bring problems like this to the table and brainstorm the power of the wisdom in the room. Like, is this time to move on, or are there moves we can make here? Is this a polite don't bother me anymore? You know, if we're social sellers, we're going to walk away because we don't want to offend the prospect. But are we helping the prospect if they're in a suboptimal position and we don't challenge them? So here's where Bob responds, right? And he's trying to overcome the first two fatal flaws. He's not in a serious conversation and they don't believe him, and he's going to bring brains and guts. So let's look at his response and let's unpack it. He begins by saying, I'm surprised to hear you say that. He's challenging her thinking. And now he has to back it up with other stuff. So that's a source of fireworks. I'm surprised to hear you say that. And then he says, I don't think you're acting fairly, like we're bringing good ideas to the table and you're not responding to them. More fireworks. And then he escalates. He just goes back to the boss man, he talks to him and enrolls him again. More fireworks. And then finally, he includes a quote from a testimonial letter. I'm going to enlarge one part of it. Your innovative thinking has saved my business over $200,000 annually. This is for the second fatal flaw, the skepticism. So I'm surprised to hear you say that is the doorway to challenging, that's the bold behavior, the guts, to challenging a prospect who doesn't seem to be open. It's business selling for business values for someone who takes a do-or-die approach to getting the job done. If you want something softer, could you help me understand this? I'm curious about your thinking. But in this case, that wouldn't have worked because we had the door shut. But if someone's resisting you, you could use softer challenges. It also used the half idea principle. Let's talk about that for a moment. If we bring half of an idea to the table, including a material difference, which is a difference so strong the prospect should change their behavior, in fairness, the prospect should finish the idea and give us coaching. How might we ask for it? Sounds like we can meet your urgent need. Can I count on you to give me feedback to guide me in preparing the proposal for a win-win relationship? The default position typically is that if you give an attractive proposal to a prospect, he or she is going to go back to the incumbent and shop you. And this is one of the reasons why in your fact finding, it's so critical to find uncontested space, a defensive position, because then they can't just do that. But in any case, asking for fairness is bold behavior, and it's an important part of the process. The next thing that Bob did is he went to the CEO, he went to the owner of the business. All too often we have situations where decision makers make decisions to suit their own convenience. They're not aligned with the best interests of the organization. So we go to the top of the organization. Now, some people will say, well, won't that ruin the relationship? And we'll talk about that possibly later. But this is one of the reasons it makes sense to start at the top. If the kind of decision you're seeking is not one that the CEO or owner would make, then they can refer you to the right person and you'll have hopefully their sanction. So we sent out this very powerful email. I'm surprised to hear you say that. You're not being fair. I talked to your boss, testimonial letter, and look at this. 2 minutes later, we got an email. Thanks, Bob. Dr. E and I will connect. Fireworks. Fireworks. So we don't know what's going to happen, but an hour before, she told us, Go take a hike. We're going elsewhere. And now we're re-engaged. Better than this email, right? So Bob overcame the reversal curve. He was in the trough, and with powerful language, hard-hitting messaging, he overcame the reversal curve and got to the green box. And he may need to do this again and again. And that's the agony and the ecstasy of selling. What are the yin and yang moves that you use, the guts and brains, bold vision, bold behavior, to move things forward? It's one way for us to exceed the selling limit, where the state police officers pull us over because we're selling too much and we're making the competition look bad. One idea you could bring to your organization, if you're not already doing it, to get bolder behavior is weekly 30-second drills. What was the boldest behavior you did this week? Why did you need it? What was the outcome? It's a great way to reinforce a bold behavior culture. Now, how do we earn the right to the bold behavior? If we don't earn the right, we're just going to seem arrogant. Wisdom. So preparation, part of the brains here, part of the vision is we're doing wisdom-based selling. We want to become a trusted advisor. This helps level the playing field. Let's review a few other ideas as to what you could do to overcome the reversal curve. Are you doing your research? You may find this extraordinary, but in my experience, most salespeople do little or no research, and it's a major source of wisdom. Also, with your marketing people, make sure you know how you're going to nail an urgency, what will make a material difference. This is part of your preparation. When you reach out, you're going to reach out with freebies. You're going to reach out with that wisdom. You're going to reach out with hot button issues. You're going to use your great testimonials. And again, you would be amazed how many of my clients, I've dealt with over 170 clients. I've worked with over 170 clients in the last 30 years. How few of them have any testimonials at all, and particularly ones that address common objections. Might be something to work on. And then the economic justification. Most of my clients are not the low-cost provider, but they help their clients, their customers, earn more by charging more. And part of the answer is builder's grade versus quality. We sell quality, or do you want to do it once right, or do you want to repeat it many times? And then finally, in your diagnostic questions, and I kind of referred to this earlier, are you asking the why and why now questions? The why and why now questions are so critical to doing your economic justification. This is bold behavior to do it, and it's evidence you have a relationship. So you'll have some people who say, I'm a relationship salesperson. Well, can you tell me why and why now? Oh, I wouldn't ask them that. And what they mean is they have social relationships, but not business relationships. And of course, we don't want a tyranny of the or. Now, when you follow this approach, when you use a good battle plan and you back it up with brains and guts, that's how you open and close more profitable opportunity. Well, we all know that Rome wasn't built in a day, so we're almost at the end of today's webinar. You might want to think about your takeaways, and we're going to have a couple of minutes for questions. If you have a question, please, using the control panel, send it to me in the chat box. But before we go to questions, just a reminder, if you want a copy of the battle plan, just send me a note after the webinar, and I'll send it off to you. Our next webinar on, I think it's on October 10th at 10:30, is how to sell without objections. How do you earn the right to the closing conditions? So now we have a couple of minutes for questions. Does anybody have a question? I'll be glad to answer them or try to answer them. Here's a question. Isn't it better to get people to like you than, to be bold? Isn't it better to do this? People do business with people they like. And I'm expanding on something I already said before. I see this as like a tyranny of the or kind of thing. Yeah, if a straight social relationship will get you what you want, I suppose that's fine, but it rarely seems to work. You need to develop a business relationship, so there's an and there, is an and there. So isn't it better to have a social relationship? Absolutely. But without a business relationship, one of two things will likely happen. Either you won't close or you'll close unprofitable business. Any other questions? Hey, won't some of this bold behavior ruin relationships? Isn't that a possibility? And the answer is yes. It can cause loss of relationships. But having done this for over 30 years, I can tell you that you'll substantially increase your sales. And one of the first places we did this, by the way, this whole program with the bold behavior, was selling to pharmaceutical companies, where I remember the COO saying to me, Chief Operating Officer, there's only 7 real clients out there. We can't lose any relationships. Here's another question. Curious if you have creative examples of freebies that aren't traditional case studies. Well, one thing I would definitely recommend, and you might consider this traditional, is before and after pictures or before and after scenarios. And I'm mentioning this, you may think it's what you're, it's not what you're asking, but when there's a visual component to what we do, it's really critical to do before and after. In terms of non-conventional, my first business was a sales agency. I sold packaging to companies, and it was like one of the toughest sales that I've ever seen, because I was selling into a declining market against entrenched competition who had a better offer than I did. And so I had to do something that was creative, something that had nothing to do with the product. And what I did is I had an MBA and I had some ideas. I coached people on how to run their business better. It had nothing to do with the packaging that I was selling, but I developed strong consultative trusted advisor relationships by offering advice on how to run their business. And the net of that was that when they could order from me, they did. So that's an example of maybe a little bit of an out-of-the-box freebie. The other thing that I would mention that you're probably doing, but it's a little bit out of the box, is, one of the reasons we like to visit people and get in their personal space is to see what they like. Like I'm in New Jersey, and so if someone has new, Giants paraphernalia all over the wall, they're probably a Giants fan, and so I guess that's kind of obvious. But sometimes we'll give a gift of some sort that's a freebie. It can be a little bit out of the box. So I had a client recently who bought a pair of sneakers with the logo of the local team, and sent it out and said, I'm just looking to get a foot in the door. I'll bring the other shoe when I come to visit. I hope that gives you a couple of ideas to think about. Well, I guess our time is up. If there are no more questions right now, I thank you all for joining us. If you'd like to get a copy of the battle plan, send me an email. Or if you have any questions, I'd love to chat with you. And our next webinar is on October 10th. It's Selling Without Objections. Thanks for visiting with us today. Look forward to speaking to you in a month. Bye now.